Hello everyone, and welcome back to Warships Blitz with Terry. Today we are looking at a lower tier ship, because I don't feature lower tier ships often enough, and not everybody's playing up in tier 10 and high up and higher tiers. So this, because I just started actually grinding the Italian battleship tech tree, because I didn't want to be at the receiving end of the semi-armor piercing all the time, is the Dante Alighieri, the tier 4 Italian battleship. Now, the Dante Alighieri was the first dreadnought that the Italians were building, and she was an interesting design, to say the very least. She was participating in the First World War, but never fired her guns. These guns were not made by the Italians. These guns were made by the British. The British were quite busy building ships for pretty much everybody at the point. And these are technically the same guns that we find at the... these are the 305 millimeters, but these are also the guns we find at 320 millimeters higher up. But then as a bored-out version to a slightly higher caliber. But yeah, these are technically British guns on this Italian dreadnought. And yeah, they would be used in the Conte di Cavour, but here at Dante Alighieri, they were never fired during the First World War, because the Austria-Hungarians, who were playing on the other team at the time in the First World War, actually never sailed out of port, really. So the Italians didn't have to do any shooting, and as such, she never actually really fired her guns. If the design is reminding you of Soviet designs at the time, or of Russian designs actually at the time, you're not the only one, because they had very similar ideas with the layout, especially with the non-super firing turrets and similar things. But this was an independent development. They did not copy that from the Italians, although there was usually a lot of cooperation going on with these things. So what do we have here then? Well, it's a tier 4 battleship, and tier 4 is usually an entry tier, right? You often skip over even if you don't skip, but you normally play through the first 3 tiers quite quickly. Tier 4 is where you might be ending up playing a couple of games, and then moving up to tier 5 and 6. But often tier 5 and 6 start costing a little bit of silver as well. So oftentimes you find people actually still playing at tier 4 who are relatively new to the game. One of the problems that you often find in lower tiers is, well, destroyers, especially destroyers who know what they're doing, are very, very powerful. And this is not a problem that you will face in the Dante Alighieri, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. So let's have a look first at the actual ship. It's a average amount of hit points. She's not the most well armored of all ships. So in a brawl against something like a Wyoming, you will find that it can actually at close range get quite difficult. The speed is not terrible, but it's also not great. It's a World War I ship, right? They're not the fastest out there, but she is relatively maneuverable. The guns, like I mentioned, are the 305 millimeter Vickers, and we get 12 of them. The arrangement is quite interesting. Let's have a quick look at that actually. So as you can see, the turrets are not super firing. And the Italians have explicitly tried to build something that had as little superstructure as possible and was very flat. And as you can see, they have somewhat succeeded, because that thing is flat. Is flat as a pancake. The guns are not super firing. In fact, the forward turret is actually higher than the second turret. But as you can see, the 2 mid turrets can swing around behind the superstructure and don't need to, go the long way. So in a pinch, you can sort of go bow in and get the guns on the other side of the ship in a reasonable amount of time, at least the center 2. So that is something that allows for certain interesting things from time to time. What else can we say about this ship? You can either get more hit points or more torpedo damage reduction. I would generally go with more hit points because they are globally useful, whereas torpedo damage reduction, and if you're new to this, the 7% aren't additive. So torpedo damage reduction at 10.5%, it's not that then you get 17.5%, but that you get a little bit more, 7% of 10% that you get on top. So I would recommend that one. You don't have an awful lot of choice in terms of equipment. I am using the main battery mod 1 for a faster turret traverse because you do want the like what I mentioned, you can swing the center turrets around to the other side from time to time. That is useful. I am actually using the propulsion mod in second because she is quite she steers quite well with the steering mod in slot 3. So all in all, with that setup, we're at 18 seconds to full speed, which is not bad. I mean, it's not an awful lot of full speed, but the turn time with 8.6 seconds is really not bad at all. And the turret traverse on the mains is at 5.4, and she does get 120 millimeter secondaries. These secondaries aren't actually bad, aren't bad either. They have a decent range. There's an awful lot of them, and they don't do an awful lot of damage, but they reload quickly. You do get a little bit of token AA, but don't expect it to shoot down a lot of fighters. It's better than what some of the Americans are getting. There are ships out there who don't get any AA at all. Not that it makes any difference, but yeah, these are World War I ships, so there's not a great amount of these things. Commander skills. I have also a commander who's just starting, so there's not going to be a lot yet. But down the road, you will obviously want skills, that actually help you with things. But we get to that when I have already reviewed higher ships. So if you want to get the commander tier set up with something higher, like the Cristoforo Colombo, which is where it ultimately goes to, then there's already a video for you to check that. So this is just me catching up on my personal. This is tier 4, so there is no historical camo, which means, just using the Seaborne Assault or whatever other camo I have available. Now, why is this a fun ship at tier 4? Why am I featuring this? Why is this not the equivalent of flyover territory? Well, like I said, destroyers can be a bit of a menace at lower tiers because a lot of new players don't have the situational awareness yet. They're still focused on zooming in, trying to aim, pressing the fire button, being excited when the guns shoot. And destroyers, battleships tend to sail in a straight line, straight speeds. Destroyers can be a real menace at these lower tiers. Not so much on this thing, because and if you haven't noticed it, this is Italian. You get semi-hammer piercing shells, which interestingly enough don't actually do quite as much damage as the hammer piercing shells, but at least, and here's a slight technicality. So if we're looking at the battle wiki, and we're looking at the semi-armor piercing shells, it mentions here that SAP shells do not overpenetrate. That is, of course, not true. It would be easy, right? If anything was actually working. No, of course they do overpenetrate. I have actually reported that already, that these things overpenetrate, and but it doesn't happen very often. And it seems to only happen like on the bow section of a destroyer or something. So most of them are not going to overpenetrate, let me put it that way. And I believe it's a bug, and hopefully it'll get fixed at some point. But still, with this armor piercing, you have an alpha strike of almost 12,000 points of damage, because destroyers don't have an awful lot of armor to reduce this by. So let's have a very quick look at tier 4 destroyers. I mean, I don't have an awful lot of them around, so obviously, because in the settings, tech tree is what you want. So let's just have a look at something common. Let's say something American at tier 4. That would be the Clemson. Now the Clemson has 9,000 hit points. That is because that's the base value. We're going to need to put that into the comparison. So let's do that. Where was I? Hell, let's use the Shenyang since I've got her here. So let's compare these two. and the Shenyang has 10,000 hit points and a damage reduction of 3%. Which means if you get all guns on target, which you're not going to, but if you get most of them on target with 12 guns and 1,064 points of damage and mostly no overpenetrations, yes, you can do the Agincourt maneuver. You can drive next to a full health destroyer and blow it clean out of the water. Because destroyer captains at tier 4 also don't necessarily expect that to happen when they're sitting right next to a battleship, because it usually doesn't. I mean, the British, the Orion, is pretty notorious for that as well. I mean, but she can't quite do it. But this thing is on another level altogether. So let's look at that a little bit more in detail. In the first battle, I did miss the opening screen, but it is a 3 versus 3, and we're up against double Wyoming and a Wix class destroyer. So yeah, one thing that you get in lower tiers quite a bit is bots, lots of bots, because they tend not to be as populated, depending on the time on the server. But this is also a common map that you find on lower tiers, and you will be spotted relatively early on. So, and it's a relatively small map. You can have quite interesting games, because even in a battleship, you can manage to capture the to get to the enemy capture circle. Now, and we've just got bots to shoot at over here. The semi-armor piercing, as you can see, is over-penetrating at times when you're hitting, but it shouldn't. But if it doesn't, the amount of damage it does is astonishing. So we'll demonstrate that on that bot over here. Once the guns have reloaded, don't neglect the secondaries. They're actually quite good. But yeah. Hello, Mr. Izukaze. Goodbye, Mr. Izukaze. And you were like, yeah, okay, that was a bot. Yes, but most players at this tier also don't really know that this can happen. So if you're up against other things, like battleships, it can often be slightly better to use the armor piercing. So now that I'm shooting at the Wyoming, I'm just going to unload the SAP and switch over to the AP. Although it seems like the difference isn't astonishingly big, I find that both actually work reasonably well at this tier. And it's just that the armor piercing has very slightly higher alpha damage and should have higher penetration technically. So let's wipe out that St. Louis over there, just so we're not distracted by this. And then, yeah, okay, so that Wyoming is going the long way around. I am still after that Wix over there. So let's see what we can do about that thing. There are 2 enemy battleships pushing for our cap. One of them is the bot, the other one is a player. Wix is trying to torpedo the bot battleship. And obviously I've got the armor piercing loaded. The armor piercing at this range will actually not over-penetrate either. And you can do very nasty things to destroyers as well. I wasn't even that far off. So, but semi-armor piercing is really, really murderous, as we will once again demonstrate on this unlucky tier 3 destroyer who is sailing in straight lines. Don't hold it against them, like I said. It's new players have to make that experience, but destroyer captains. This is necessary experience. You need to know this when you're playing higher tiers as well. If you see anything Italian looking at you, there's a high chance that they have the semi-armor piercing loaded, which means that you very, very much want to be somewhere else. Because if you thought British battleships were bad, Italian battleships are monstrous. So let's wipe out that Kawachi over there. And then we've just got the, and that's the Kraken, and it just leaves the single Wyoming over there, because I think our Wyoming won his battle on the other side. So it looks like he's going to come around the island. Our destroyer is on the far end there at the capture circle. But given that the Wyoming hasn't spotted me, because I'm behind an island and he's nobody to spot, there's nobody there for him to spot, yeah, he's looking at the other direction. So I get to farm some free damage. This is the other thing, obviously, at lower tiers. Obviously, oftentimes people don't necessarily know where to look. And to his to his credit, he's turning around. He's doing the right thing. There is a Clemson coming after him. I mean, he's lost, right? There's no way he's going to win. The only way would have been by capping, and there's a Clemson in the way. And that wouldn't have gone very well. So now it's me against the Wyoming. Generally not a fight I would take at this close range, because I have lost a couple of brawls like this against Wyomings. These things can be surprisingly tough, and the Dante Alighieri is not that tough. It is more one of the earlier dreadnoughts. But yeah, he's wildly turning. Obviously, being shot at from multiple directions, it does that to you. So he's never getting all his guns on target, and there's no real danger. So let's leave the kill for the Clemson, because I already took the Kawachi while he was flooding. So let's leave it for him. And there he gets his kill. Nicely done. Good job. Nice torpedo drop, and that is game. But yeah, 50 to 60,000 points of damage is something you can relatively easily do in this thing at tier 4. That is, I would say, up there with the Orion in terms of damage potential that you can do. And especially the slapping destroyers out of the water never gets old. So let's do that again. The second game, a 6v6 domination on New Dawn. It is technically a tier 5 game, but there's only one tier 5 on the enemy team, and that's a bot, so it doesn't matter. It's flat out tier 4, really. We're up against Langley, Wyoming, Courbet, Clemson, Isokaze, and another Clemson. Yeah, AA, nah, not great, but that's typical for everything on tier 4. Carriers don't face any opposition from AA at that tier. So, what are we going to do? We are spawning with one of the bots and with the V170. I'm going to follow the bot into A cap. The V might be going into B by the looks of it. So let's... yeah, the V is announcing that he's going into B cap. So, sure, go for it. I'm a go and see that A cap stays clear. You don't know where the enemy team goes. There might be some ships coming around this side, we don't know. There's a lot of destroyers here, which very unusually for battleships, you generally don't have to be an awful lot afraid of, because you're in an Italian battleship, and Italian battleships are hilarious when it comes to destroyers, at least especially at these tiers, where, you know, destroyers haven't really mastered a lot of the more advanced techniques quite yet. At higher tiers, this can get a little different. All right, what do we got to shoot at? There is some form of battleship over there. I have the SAP loaded. That's the Courbet. That is a bot Nicholas. So let's wait for him to make up his mind where he wants to go. Unload at him, but I think there's a second. Okay, and that's the Isokaze, so that's not a bot. And I think my shots have all missed. Yeah, these guns are not the most precise, and obviously bots doing their defying of physics thing. But yeah, now I have a bit of an issue, because there's an Isokaze. I'm not sure where his torpedoes are going. That is not where I am, and not where I could possibly be going. But now he's doing a cardinal error. He's giving broadside. And he got very lucky that he didn't get deleted there. But the other thing with destroyers at this tiers is that they are reloading very, very quickly. So now it's time to... I don't think he's reloaded quite yet, but it's probably about time. So it's time to go bow in and not sit broadside to the destroyer. And just wait for my guns to reload. Now my guns are reloaded, but my turrets aren't on target. So he gets a set of 4 torpedoes away. The Dante Alighieri, however, is a very maneuverable ship, so I can do this. And now I can do that. That wasn't a bad play, honestly. That wasn't a terrible play, right? For a tier 4, that was a decent rush. He was using concealment. Well, his mistake obviously was that he was coming out behind the island again, but that wasn't a terrible play. The one thing that you need to learn then as a destroyer player is that you don't do that in front of British or especially Italian battleships. That is effectively a death sentence. So okay, let's just wipe out that remaining bot here, and then we can probably head towards the center, because by the looks of it, there's nobody there. I mean, tier 4 battles aren't strategic in any way. Everybody just sails around in the countryside. I'm just generally keeping an eye on the caps and the kills. I mean, it looks like we're holding all 3 caps in the end, and we're 2 kills ahead. So This does look decent, but it looks like one of our destroyers has gone straight for the carrier and has taken that thing down. And the corbeil didn't look like he was going to do much about it. So, yeah, it's the V. Okay, so V can play with the corbeil. I have switched over to the armor piercing because there is a Wyoming. Now, I don't know what that Wyoming is looking at, but let's see if we can do a bit of a drive-by here, in case he isn't looking my way. Either way, I'm pointing my nose towards the Wyoming and giving the V fire support against the corbeil. Okay, the Wyoming is shooting at the V, which is noble, but that corbeil is dead, because he hasn't learned his WASD hacks yet. That means steering your ship. And yeah, the Wyoming has not realized, because he's probably zoomed in and is waiting for his guns to reload. So if you're doing that, first of all, switch at that range, high explosive, use your secondaries, and yeah, be aware of what's going on around you, because obviously now I get to farm the Wyoming from the other side. But and the V is going to pop out behind the island. See, this is the problem with destroyers. The battleships are so slow that there's just no chance of disengaging, and Wyoming is going to run straight into a series of V torpedoes coming right out from that island. So there's really not an awful lot he could have done better here, but and still shooting armor piercing. Yeah, so he could have taken down the V here and survived, because the V just, if he had used armor piercing, that V would have been dead. If you had used high explosive, that V would have been dead. So, anyway, no ruffle stomp medal for us, because we've lost a destroyer somewhere along the road, but there's just 2 destroyers left. So while I'm trying to get these relatively imprecise guns on target for the rest of the game, yeah, this is a fun ship. I mean, you're not going to be playing it for an awful lot of time, because you're, at least XP-wise, across tier 4 relatively quickly. The tier 5s do cost a bit of silver, so if you don't have that just right now, but still, it's a fun ship. So if you ever want to play a battleship at tier 4, and one thing that you do find occasionally is seal clubbers, especially using things like Ubaris or destroyers, and just massacring all the slow, inexperienced battleships. That thing is great fun and hilarious, because you know, it can do that to destroyers, and that can be very, very satisfying. So yeah, that's sort of what that thing is good for. But yeah, fun ship, and like I said, I am trying to feature lower tier ships more from time to time, just because, you know, they exist. They sometimes have interesting histories. Not so much in this case, because she didn't do an awful lot in the war, but still, like I said, very consistent ship. 56,000 damage, normal amount that you can do in this boat. And yeah, fun ship to play. You won't see me anymore, because I'm already done with the grind here. But I'll keep it around, maybe. if I team up with somebody who wants to play at tier 4, then that'll definitely be a ship I'll be using. Anyway, that's it for me today. Thanks everybody, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.